First of all, I realize she's a lot younger than I am. She's a lot better looking than I am. She's actually bigger than I am. I'm sure she can kick my ass. And I also realize she's probably got more money than I do. On that basis, I got to tell you something. If I'm ever reborn, I'd like to come back as Ronda Rousey.
All right, Matt Serra is the ultimate underdog and MMA Rocky figure, if ever there was one. Tell me your thoughts about Matt the Terra Serra.
I really enjoyed hanging out with Matt a little bit this weekend. Great guy. Didn't know him personally. Really a cool guy. Love his manager, Ray Longo. He and I go back to New York together and know a lot of the same people like Lou Leglia. But I was really impressed with how fit and how cool, how smart Matt is. I got to tell you something. He is the ultimate Rocky story in MMA.
Bruce Connal is an icon who shaped the look of the UFC on the TV side. What memories or thoughts do you have of Bruce?
You know, Bruce was really a great pioneer and really set the template for how the UFC is presented to the public on television. And let's be honest, you know, you got to look at Mark Lucas in the first 27 shows as director. You got to look at Bruce's brother Al Connal as being a director. Those guys, the Connells, the Connal family, have made a tremendous contribution to MMA. And there's no doubt about it that having him in the contributor wing of the Hall of Fame is a great honor. Absolutely.
Shogun versus Hendo is in many fans and pundits' eyes, one of the greatest fights of all time. Talk a little bit about the fight and the two combatants on that night in San Jose.
Well, you know, I have to agree that I think it is one of the great seminal fights of all time, and I feel sad and bereft of the experience and that I wasn't there that night. You know, you got to remember that after I moved on, a large part of the great stories of MMA that have shaped the sport now are ones that I wasn't, personally privy to. But that night in San Jose was a watershed time for the UFC. You might have to say that bout, along with the Forrest Griffin Stephan Bonner fight, were maybe two of the most important bouts in UFC history.
We had talked about maybe getting together sometime this week. I'm glad I did it after the induction. When you look back on your Hall of Fame induction, what's really going to stick out to you?
You know, I think for me it was the opportunity to get with the fans. I was mobbed for over an hour when I walked out of the Pearl Theater that night, and I signed so many autographs, took so many photos with so many fans who were so glad to meet me. I think if anything, that kind of reminded me that the Hall of Fame, being an enormous honor, probably will alert people to what I did, my story, in a way that maybe nothing else has.
Okay, so next year, let's play the hypothetical game for a second. Next year, Dana calls you up and he says, Art, it's your year to pick all the inductees. Who would you induct in the Pioneer Wing, the Modern Era contributor and fighter? The fight's a little trickier, but who would you put in if you got to be the guy that made the decision?
That's a great question. In terms of the Hall of Fame, if I had some vote on who gets picked, who gets selected and inducted, I'd have to tell you that I'd like to see John McCarthy in the contributor wing, a great personal friend who set the standards for fighters' safety and referees in general. I'd like to see Mark Ratner in the contributors wing. If anybody helped to create the standards that allowed other states to sanction this sport, bringing Mark Ratner on board in 2006 was one of the greatest things that Lorenzo Fertitta ever did. And I got to tell you something, when it comes to the Pioneer wing, I'm waiting for Frank Shamrock, one of my personal favorites. One of my personal favorites. You know, the modern wing, I think I want a little more time to mull that one over because I think there are so many great fighters. And also the big question comes up, should fighters maybe have to be fully retired for 2 years before they're inducted into the Modern Hall of Fame? Or is there something about once you've retired, you're then eligible? Very good question.
Finally, to wrap up our bonus content, when they speak about Art Davie, whether it's me, your good friend Sean Wheelock, your family, your friends, MMA fans, what do you want said?
Well, I think I'd like to be remembered as the pioneer, the guy who had the brainstorm and then had the gumption and the ability as a Pied Piper to get people to follow him and make this thing happen. I was at the right place at the right time, and I'll be honest with you, it's been a thrill for me to look back on my baby and see how much my baby has grown.